So, I've got a question around basically Germany in a sense. Me and Aaron discussed on the podcast. I think Aaron brought it up in one of our pods um, that Hitler, when he was running Nazi Germany, or was it before? He had a woman from India working with him and teaching him some of the ways of ancient Hinduism.
Hmm.
Do you know anything around that?
Well, yeah. As a matter of fact, it's kind of it's an interesting story. So the English and most of the languages in the West are Indo-European in origin. So there's a sort of common ancestry between all of the ethnic groups that were born from Europe, India, and even parts of the Middle East. It's just one common sort of human group, right? A haplogroup or whatever they call it in anthropology. And the Germans knew this because that was around the same time this science was being developed. These things were being studied in Germany, where most of the universities, the big universities, were back then. Um, and yeah, one thing that people don't really talk about with World War One is the German India Hindu connection. Like Hindustan was fighting England, so was Germany. So Germany was like, "Hey, India, let's link up. I'm going to send you guns. You guys are going to keep Britain busy here while we're fighting them on the other battlefront," right? This is a war strategy. So they had tons of Germans going throughout India and vice versa. Even in America, you have the German agents and Hindu agents working together to smuggle weapons through Texas to the West Coast, so then they can, sail them through the Pacific into the South Indian Sea. So there you go. I mean, there's the political reason, but yeah, there was a sort of metaphysical interest there as well, where clearly the Germans were mystified by the yogis and the different mystics that were very much a part of Hindu culture, and they found this sort of lineage, this common ancestry. So they thought, hey, why don't we synthesize a lot of this stuff? Hence the swastika, being flipped on the reverse and becoming, well, I guess before it was known as the swastika, it was reversed. They reversed it and turned it into this like power symbol, which it always has been. And it's, that kind of symbol I think is used in every culture around the world. I mean, it's not just Hindu culture, but around that time, theosophy was very popular. Theosophy was a sort of pseudo religion created by folks like Helena Blavatsky and others. And they were these occultists from that time period. And back then, religion had just sort of eased up a bit. So people were kind of free to explore spiritual practices that were once banned. And obviously in India, these kind of mystical arts had been practiced for hundreds of years contiguously. So all of these kind of blended together in this German view of themselves, this idea that we are like the Aryan man, the Aryan elite, the I think they called them Wundermen or something like that, like basically Superman. This is where the superhero idea comes from. Superheroes were invented around this same time. There were comic books back in those days, and they would have like cops fighting bad guys and stuff. But this kind of occult magical stuff mixed its way in. And yeah, it's interesting now because now like a lot of the ideas that came out of this Nazi interest in Eastern mysticism, we would consider them like new age stuff, like kundalini and meditation. Like all of this stuff was a part of that culture of like reconnecting with their ancient roots. The Germans believed that, in the very, very ancient past, they were the Aryans, and that they were, these like super beings that the gods actually created and then spread them throughout the world from India to the Middle East to Europe. And, so it was sort of like this racially charged idea. It's definitely still present today. I mean, there's groups in the Ukraine who identify themselves as Nazis that are fighting the Russians. So, it's definitely not like a arcane belief system. It's still alive and well. And it's kind of fused into like the neo-pagan groups as well that are popular in Europe, where people realize, hey, I'm not so Christian. I actually have like pagan ancestry, so I want to learn about that kind of stuff instead of the Bible. I think it's all related to this kind of I forget the term that they use to describe the 1700s, but there's the age of enlightenment, but there's another term that they use. It's like the age of spiritual something, unraveling or awakening. And it's because at this time, a lot of the very strict, rigid religions, organizations kind of eased up a bit, or through political or, worldly events, lost some of their power and influence, right? So now these smaller groups of subsects of Christianity and Judaism and whatnot are practicing what were once banned occult type practices out in public. The spiritualists, they were doing like these seances where people would come and sit down and hold hands, and the psychic would, pull in the consciousness of somebody's dead uncle, and then they would talk to that guy's dead uncle for the hour, right? I mean, this is the kind of thing that was going on in India too, with the swamis and the yogis, right? Who, some of them were very honest and spiritual. Others were just like tricksters. They would do like sort of like carnival tricks to get people interested in, I don't know, signing up for something or giving them money, right? They would do like the thing where they climb up a rope and the rope is like just standing in the air, like, only on the ground, or like the snake charming, right? That's like a stereotype. But all of that is a part of this culture explosion, this metaphysical explosion that happened prior to World War I, specifically in Germany, but not limited to Germany. And it developed this kind of really pervasive philosophy that Hitler used to his advantage, because for the 30, 40 years prior to Hitler kind of coming into power, the German people were all excited about this idea that, oh, we're the great Germans and we have this magical ability and we have this like ancient magical lineage. So it's essentially propaganda that they were all, ingesting for multiple years before Hitler came along and just like put a spark to the dry kindling and said like, yes, you are great, be great, because World War I, they were all crippled. Their cities were bombed, destroyed. And here comes Hitler, like, I'm going to make this great again, like make Germany great again, right? Where have we heard that phrase used before? So yeah, I think it's a very complicated subject. But then when you look into like some of the more strange things that happened during and after World War II, like Aleister Crowley being sent to fight a German magician. There was Aleister Crowley, the famous occultist. He was actually working for MI6, the British Special Forces, and they tricked one of Hitler's wizards, because Hitler had like professional magic wizards that he would use to help him win battles. He sent one of them over to England to fight Aleister Crowley, and Crowley, he just set the guy up, and the Scotland police ended up arresting the wizard. Not so magical, but he like flew there, jumped out of a parachute with all these magical sigils on his jacket, and landed in Scotland ready to fight Aleister Crowley. And he lands in some field, and sirens and cops, and they all just grab him and throw him in jail. So we know that this kind of thing, like, not only happened, but it was taken seriously. It was taken seriously by Hitler. Like this, as awful and evil as he was, a very impactful military leader, dare I say. He definitely affected the world's events. Some people think that he was propped up by money influences, the kinds that were circling Skull and Bones. So it all gets connected, like Skull and Bones actually, the Yale University itself sent men, college-age men, to go fight in World War One, even though the United States was not participating at that time in World War One. The guys at Yale were so patriotic to the English cause that they, for fun, went over to Germany in planes and bombed people. I mean, could you imagine that? Like college students being like, yeah, hey, like we're not soldiers, but we love this war so much, we're going to get into planes and go drop bombs on Iraq. Could you imagine if someone did that like today, or Afghanistan, right? If someone did that today, like no way. These kids at school, they hate war. They're protesting war, even though the school they go to is getting money from these conflicts, right? So yeah, I mean it's a whole flipped, inverted thing where you realize like, oh, what I thought was one way is actually another, and all these people who think that this is that way, it's actually the other way. And I think that's a big reason why this like entrainment on society is so effective, because it's this Hegelian sort of double think where there's like they're always keeping people within these two choices. It's like this divisive strategy where if you give people two choices, they'll always team up against each other. I don't know if that's an inevitability, logically speaking, but I think that that's what's playing out, and it's not
Well, I
organic.
think we saw that sort of exacerbated during the pandemic.
Yeah,